About 4 days ago, I decided I would take a break from palisade wall construction just for a bit of variety. And so I've spent 4 days building the fireplace for what is going to become my gun building shop. And my bag's telling me that it's time to go back to palisade wall building. It's like building a puzzle without having the advantage of a picture and all the pieces are the same color. Anyway, I've been gathering stones. I got another wheelbarrow out here, and you'd think when you look around at the ground that I've got lots of stone, but it's finding that right one. The process I use is I dry fit a layer, try to keep it about the same height. Once I've got it dry laid, then I set it in mortar, and then the search begins for another set of rocks. It amazes me that it took so long for humans to invent or think up the idea of a chimney. So the oldest one in England dates back to 1185 AD, but it didn't become common until the 16th and 17th century. Prior to that, it was like sometimes a raised area in the center of a structure with a hole in the roof. I believe it was the Vikings that designed some kind of a louver system in their great halls that would allow the smoke to sort of filter out, at the same time keeping inclement weather from coming in. And I've built wigwams before where I've had an open fire in the center, and I can tell you, they are a smoky thing. And if you think about native structures, if we look at the teepee, sort of the Plains Indian design, they were much more efficient at getting rid of smoke. And I think because essentially they had a big chimney. They had created a ventura that went up to in a cone shape that speeded up the rate at which smoke could leave the room. But for centuries, people lived with the acrid smell and the burning eyes of rooms filled with smoke. They had to keep warm, they had to cook their food, and that was just the norm of it all. In fact, right into the 19th century, so in the area that Kathy and I live in the Ottawa Valley, the heart of the valley they call it, it wasn't settled until the 1850s, and the Irish, mostly by Irish Catholic, because you can see you can see what the farmland's like with the rocks I'm sitting on. This is what we have in our fields. They would have a raised stone platform with a wooden crane over top of the fireplace and a hole in the roof, and that's well documented. So now we get into chimneys, and the first ones built were made of wood. And then they packed them or plastered them, if you would, with clay. Some call it cob, some call it daub. There's a number of names for it. But they were inherently risky in terms of fires. So that technology, even though we have brick chimneys in the more affluent parts of England, let's say, the poor simply can't afford that. So they're still using this old technology. Now, when they immigrate to the Americas, they take this technology along with them. So last week we did an episode where we showed wattle fencing. Again, a custom that was brought from Europe to the New World. And they bring this technology for their fireplaces, or particularly for their chimneys, along with them. And it's well documented. There's pictures, there are oil paintings of the chimneys being offset from the structure. And the purpose of that was that they could throw a rope around it or climb up on the roof, and if there was a chimney fire, they could push that away with the hope of saving the structure. Because we're talking an era where there wasn't any fire insurance. That's for sure and for certain. The problem was not only the chimney and its design, but it was the fireplace. So this is going to be a very shallow fireplace along the lines of a Rumford, and I'm going to get into that in a bit. But the chimneys at the time, in the 15, 16, 17, early 1700s, were simply a box in the wall. And I've had so many people ask me when we built the tavern, the Cedar Hollow Tavern, people said, well, you darn fool, why do you put your chimney on the outside of the cabin and you lose all that thermal energy? And they're spot on. But what Kathy and I tried to do when we built the tavern was to recreate a 17th century structure. And that's the way they were built. In fact, although I used mortar, they would have dry laid them usually, and again with the intent that in the case of a chimney fire, they could pull or push and try to get that fire away from the structure, save the cabin. But things are going to change now, and they're going to change for the better, because for centuries people have been living, as I mentioned, in this smoke-filled environment. Certainly not good for one's health. And I don't think there's anybody who hasn't sat around a campfire that has felt that burning in their eyes. And no matter where you sit on that fire, that smoke just seems to want to chase you around. But a fellow named Benjamin Franklin and his counterpart, Benjamin Thompson in England, they're going to redesign the whole concept of both the fireplace and the chimney. It amazes me how much slower the New World is to adapt a better chimney than England, the mother country. So in 1719, the government in England passed a law saying that all old clay chimneys or clay plastered chimneys have to be rebuilt into brick. And it's not until 1789, so 70 years later, where there's a comment by George Washington, where President Washington at the time, and he's considering the merits of a brick chimney. And that 70-year period kind of blows me away that it wouldn't have happened sooner. But 1740, Benjamin Franklin invents what he calls the Pennsylvania fireplace. And not long after that, he also invents the first cast iron wood stove. And basically it's a scaled down version of the Pennsylvania fireplace. So it's the Pennsylvania cast iron wood stove. And that eliminates a whole lot of smoke, and also increases the efficiency. I'm trying to think of the name. Okay, I got the title now. So the year is 1787, and Benjamin Franklin writes a little booklet, and it's called the Observations on the Causes and Cures of a Smoky Chimney. And now we have Rumford. So we know Benjamin's system is a whole lot better, but Rumford is going to take that to a new level. Now he's a scientist by trade, and he has studied thermodynamics. And he figures out a way to make a chimney with a secondary smoke chamber, a smoke shelf, certain tapers that will speed up the removal of smoke. And he also builds a very shallow fireplace like the one I'm sitting in. This is actually a little deeper than a true Rumford. And that in itself is going to allow, with the fire back in it particularly, the transmission of a lot more heat into the room and less up the chimney. And he takes the common old hole in a wall fireplace, and he makes it about 20% more efficient. So a 40% efficient thing. Now that doesn't sound very efficient in our modern world, when a wood burning device can be 90% or better. But in that era, it took the world by storm. And it wasn't long until some of the first renovations were being done around the world to take out the old ones and install Rumfords. It had so much impact that it actually influenced the design of architecture. Now, for the first time, the fireplace and chimney didn't have to be on the outside of the house. Because of its compactness, it could go on the interior of the house, be built into that exterior wall. And it changed the whole architectural design business. Anyway, we're building somewhat of a Rumford fireplace. Some might call it a little big for my little gun building shop, but go big or go home, I guess. And I've got some more rocks, so my next step now is to try to find the next first two, roughly the same thickness, that are going to fit for my dry laying process.